Welcome to Mirahiku, Southland in New Zealand's deep south, a province of wilderness, beauty and abundance. This week, for a 68th year, the region plays host to the best road cycling talent from around New Zealand and offshore in the country's longest running and most prestigious road race. Over 100 riders across 18 teams doing battle across 867 kilometres of Southern Highway. Through fertile farmland, majestic fjordland, a defining climb up Queenstown's Remarkables, the iconic Bluff Hill, all leading to a winner being crowned in Invercargill 1 week later. This is the 2024 SBS Bank Tour of Southlands. Day 5 of the SBS Bank Tour featured another hilltop finish, the peloton backing up from Wednesday's climb up the Remarkables with the iconic Bluff Hill climb. With fine and calm conditions, any early breakaway attempts were thwarted, and it wasn't until the stage hit Wyndham that the day's break established. A lead bunch of 8 pushed out to a 2-minute lead, and that became a 5-strong break by the time the leaders turned onto Bluff Highway. But as always, all the action came on the final climb. Christchurch's Daniel Whitehouse, riding for Quality Food Southland, powered to an impressive stage victory. But it was the tour leader's day. He charged up the climb to add almost a minute to his overall lead. Josh Burnett taking a 1 minute 41 second advantage into Friday's stage to Gore.
Yeah, yesterday was it was a solid day. Mataura controlled the race and I guess kept their GC prospects well and truly safe for the moment. Obviously we were all hoping for a bit of crosswinds, but it just never really eventuated. And just came down the bluff, and obviously Josh rode up the hill quite quicker than everyone.
Matt, unfortunately had to drop his chain at the bottom of Bluff yesterday and managed to get that back on, get a spare bike and rip up and not lose too much time, so he's still second, which is good. And I didn't have the best climb, but still up there in 5th, so yeah, it's good for the team.
I managed to find myself in the silver jersey on Monday. It was a bit of a scrappy day in the wind and the crosswinds there, and then I've just been going on and off with a few of the other over 35 riders for the week and still got it today, so very pleased. Yes, this jersey is special this year because it's in recognition of Laz, one of the commissaires that's been involved with the tour and cycling throughout New Zealand for many, many years. So it's great to recognise him over this tour with the silver jersey. Yeah, with the rain that's turned up today, it's going to make things a little bit different than the previous few days. There's going to be probably some tired legs, people a little bit cautious about the rain, and so we're going to have to be very aware of what's going on around us. And no doubt there's a few people who want to take the opportunity to get up the road today and see how they go.
It's a proper Southland day today. The wind's not too bad on the predictions, but as we've seen, the wind just picks up through the valleys and you just never expect it where it's going to be strong.
Well, I think it's going to be hard from the gun just because of the wet and everyone's a bit tired, so yeah, this could be getting let go and yeah, who knows what's going to happen.
The penultimate day of this year's tour here, and it has changed dramatically when it comes to the conditions. The rain has come into play, and this could make a big difference to the way in which this stage could unfold.
Morale is everything at this stage, and there's a mixture of smiles and unhappy faces in there and nervous anticipation. Conditions like this do change things dramatically, and you really have to be on your wits in the weather like this, especially with painted lines and all of the other complications involved in bike racing in the wet.
Southland Boys High School out in support of Magnus Jameson, one of the 108 starters, as we now move from Invercargill all the way through to Gore. 151 kilometres, but a challenging stage, and a stage today, Doug, that we've seen a lot of changes overall in the general classification in years gone by.
Historically, this stage has been a pivotal point for the overall leader in the GC. These riders remember this. Riders riding these sorts of races have got a historical database of previous year's events, and they are ticking them off in a box in their minds as they go along, and they'll be making sure that they don't make the same mistakes perhaps they made previously, letting brakes go, letting the wrong riders go up the road, which is why we see such a massively furious selection on who gets away at the start.
Of course, they've got over 800 kilometres under the belt so far here in the week's worth of tour racing. The weather has changed dramatically here. How the body is going to react here with the fatigue factor, with the injuries for some of them from crashes over the last few days, could be a massive difference to here. And so riders again have to be on their game, watching very closely. And today, Doug, that'll be difficult. With the heavy pouring of the rain and the darkness starting to set in here around Southland, life is going to be very hard to pick out who's going off the front at any point.
Not to mention, Julian, that further back in the field you've got a lot of spray up from the guys in front of you on your face the whole time, from the wheels and from all of the other riders in the peloton. The riders from overseas who haven't experienced these sorts of wet conditions will be going, hey, what on earth have we got into here? Here we are coming up to James Hargis College for the first of the sprint preems. That looks like Hunter Goff here from the BJ Carter's team. He's going to win the preem outside of his old high school. Well done there. That's fantastic support once again from all the schools.
And it's a potential street here in which they're going to be using for the New Zealand Criterium Championships being hosted here in Invercargill in January as well. So a few of these riders getting a bit of a test of that as they swing down Racecourse Road, making their way down towards PowerNet. Of course, they've got a very good team who have performed exceptionally well throughout the week.
Yeah, that was a pretty good example. There's lots of corners in the stage today, lots of wet areas, lots of manhole covers you can see as we're riding along the road. The riders will be ultra careful, no more than Josh Burnett in the Mitre Q Creation Signs team. They'll be really wrapping him up and making sure there's no potential for a disaster, mechanic or a crash, and keeping him out of trouble.
And speaking of wrapped up, a lot of the jackets on, of course, a lot of dark looking colours there. So again, very difficult for us, let alone as commentators, let alone for the riders to pick out who exactly is positioned to where in the peloton. As we see Whitehouse by the looks of it, a man who has performed exceedingly well up the climbs over the last few days here, putting some pressure on at the front. He's moved himself up into the top 10 here, and he will be a serious threat to any of these riders.
Incredibly aggressive start. This is only at Finley Road. We're not that far into the stage, just at the start really. Daniel Whitehouse, I think if he hadn't have missed out that gap on day one, would have been a serious contender for the overall here. He's still coming on. I believe he's catching form as this SBS Bank Tour rolls on. Watch out for him today and tomorrow.
Yeah, agreed. He's certainly come on as the tour has gone on. There's a lot of them still kicking themselves from that first day, but a lot of them trying to make amends for it and trying to scoop up a stage for themselves, let alone for their team. And it is the Business South team that is off the front here in the pink colours. Now, this is a team that has got a number of local sponsors on board to support these guys in the pink, as they have been for a number of years.
Wonderful concept. And Alan Dunn, of course, is the driver of this. Alan Dunn is a magnificent supporter of cycling, not only in Southland but throughout New Zealand. And he's very, very well known in cycling circles. So these guys really have had a great Bailey O'Donnell, of course, there taking that sprint preem outside the Morris Bush School. Bailey O'Donnell must have almost sewn up the Sprint Ace, Harcourt Sprint Ace jersey, surely.
Oh, he's certainly got a lot of points on the road, but he'll always make sure he picks up just that few extra. And of course, he's a great example of a rider hard to pick out. With the black jacket on today, underneath, of course, is the green jersey, the typical colours for a Sprint Ace in a tour.
Daniel Whitehouse again being seriously aggressive at the front, and who's on his wheel? Josh Burnett, tucked up in the black jacket there from the Creation Signs Mitre Q team. Josh Burnett is keeping an eye on this chap. He is really forcing the pace, and Josh's best defence is just to be on his wheel.
Yes, Burnett very, very attentive now to Whitehouse, who is trying to stir things up and stretch this peloton out early on in the stage.
Daniel Whitehouse once again at the front. We're only on the outskirts of Morris Bush, very, very early on in the stage, but his intention here is to break this field up, and you can see that some of the bigger players on GC are starting to swarm to the front and are seeing the damage that he's doing and are protecting their jerseys. But Daniel Whitehouse seriously has come out today and said, I'm here to race.
See a few riders looking across to each other. Who's going to try and shut this down as a couple decide they're not really that interested at this point in time, because as we've said, this is very early on. So now another attack will come and try and jump themselves across, and it looks like one of the PowerNet riders, Ollie Jones, who had a heavy fall yesterday, to bounce back and be out here today is a huge effort.
Tough guy, Ollie Jones. In fact, all those chaps that were involved in that accident all got back on and are racing, some with stitches, I might add. But that was an incredible feat for them all to get back up. Shows you the toughness of the bike rider in New Zealand, doesn't it?
It does indeed, as we see the Transport Engineering Southland Deep South team. They shut it down very quickly here, but there's a lot of nerves out there. The fatigue factor involved, as we've mentioned a few times already here, but a lot of other riders who are keen. Oh, as we see, looks like Keith might have swung himself across the front of the peloton here, puts them into the gutter a bit, and a couple of riders get themselves straight onto his wheel. They know the sort of effort that he can put in.
Yeah, we saw him protecting his pink jersey wearer in his team yesterday and getting him across to that front group, or almost across in Bluff. Hamish Keast, what a workhorse. Great man to have on a squad. One day this boy could vie for honours, I believe, himself, if he's got the right motivation and form at the time. But he just does this continually, year in, year out.
It looks to be that the one man that has missed the break here is Whitehouse. After those constant attacks, he's softened the bunch, but has missed out on the break that is starting to open a decent gap.
Often happens that way, Julian, doesn't it? Daniel Whitehouse, though, I think at the same time is a pretty marked man. Those attacks he was putting in really stirred this field up, and they were starting to get concerned. So now that this group's heading away, you can see at the back of the peloton here, things will ease up a bit, become a wee bit more sedate, and this group that's heading away, and in quite big numbers, will take some time, I believe.
Yes, it's a large group indeed here, starting to establish themselves off the front, but it is very early days indeed. What'll be interesting to see is what the Tour Leaders team does and what a lot of the other GC contenders decide to do. Are they going to allow these guys to open a big gap for the day, or will they try and hold them at around 1 to 2 minutes?
And that really is the big question of the day, whether or not the Creation Science Mataura New Zealand Cycling Project team are going to commit the resources to these chaps who are, let's face it, the top rider here is Ben Oliver, 7th on GC at 7 minutes. So are they going to commit the resources to chasing this down, or are they just going to control things and wait and see what it develops later on in the stage?
Some very interesting names in the mix there, and a lot of new names as well that we haven't seen for the first few days of this tour, making themselves available here to this front group. Maui Morrison, one of those guys from up around Cambridge in the Pista Corsa team last year, back in action again this year, and very quickly, Doug, as they make their way up towards Lawnville here, they have opened up a decent gap on this field, but it is a large group, and we've said it time and time again, that doesn't necessarily equate to the fact that they can open up a big gap on the field, because not always does everyone want to work.
The numbers in this breakaway, as we've seen in a lot of the breakaways in this year's SBS Bank Tour, have been reasonably cohesive. We've often seen a wee group springboard off that big group, but for in part, the speed and the cohesiveness of the breakaways, in a lot of respects, is relative to the experience of a lot of these young guys. These are seasoned bike riders at a young age, and they know what the story is. They're not here to muck around.
Not at all, and you can see them now settling into their paces. And I see a bit of an orange vest up towards the front of this particular group here, Doug, but to be clear, that is not the SBS leader, and that is someone else deciding to wear an orange vest just to protect themselves from the very cool and damp conditions that these riders are dealing with today.
So the lead group here has established itself a nice wee breakaway. Back at the front of the group here, the chasing peloton, the Creation Signs Mitre Q boys are right at the front of this, and will be making sure they've got a bit of a handle on things. You can see them all here lined up and behind each other and rolling through and catching a bit of a break. Marshall Irwood there in second wheel, back in after that crash. So these guys have seriously organised themselves.
And I see Ben Oliver has got himself back into there. He's been called back for the team, and his team leader sitting back in the main section of the peloton, having a bit of a chat. He's got his soldiers at the front here, doing a lot of the work, as you'd expect to do. That's part of the protocol as Craig Oliver drives it.
62 Ks completed of a total of 151 kilometres in total in this distance. You can see the second half of the stage is a lot lumpier and harder than the first stage part of it. So the peloton, and we can see here, we've talked about the Mataura team being at the front, driving this pace, trying to catch that lead group, controlling it all. There's Josh Burnett. He's having a very soggy, wet day there. Got the glasses off. They've obviously fogged up completely. But the tour leader is starting to swap through, help the guys out.
And James Williamson just drifting back there. A man that's got a lot of experience when it comes to the tour riding here, and hence why they've got him in the team as the road captain there for the Creation Signs team. As we get another great shot here of the leading group, they've got a gap now of 5 minutes and 20 seconds. That is opening up significantly here, and of course, in amongst this group, the biggest challenges to the GC, there's 3 to 4 riders hovering around that 10 to 11 minute gap, so quite a bit of time still to make up.
Yeah, how far out does the elastic go before things get called in and reined in at the front of that group back in the chasing peloton? But in the meanwhile, these guys have set their work. They're all rolling through. No one is sitting on. And this break, I believe, will probably take more time yet.
Former New Zealand under-19 Criterium champion going through there with Morrison. And here's Bettles. Now, this is an interesting move. This is a guy we haven't seen a lot of throughout the tour here. Of course, he was a former stage winner up the Remarkables. He came in as one of the favourites this year. He's made the break.
And I think a lot of these chaps are trying to redeem their day one sort of missing of the break when the whole thing went down the road and they all took 7 minutes. So this situation here is textbook cycling. Break goes, GC wearing tour leaders team at the front of the group, all swapping round. Things are getting soggy here. This looks really tough out there. Tough conditions to bike race in.
A massive turn there by the youngster from Invercargill, Marshall Irwood. Of course, one of the ones involved in that crash yesterday. They'll allow him back into the roll there at the front as we go back to the front, now extending to 6:04. This is becoming a big gap, and it's going to be very interesting now what the sort of thoughts are back in that peloton, whether we chase it, whether we just try and halve that gap, because again, they're not all big threats to the GC.
What's happening in the peloton, what's happening in the front of this race is there's some smiles in these faces, believe it or not. These guys are going, hey, we've got a shot here, we've got a genuine chance. 6 minutes up in this sort of stage, you're thinking we're going to have a crack. One of us is potentially going to be the stage winner here, which is probably the motivation for them all. Just keep rolling through. This is tough conditions here. Days like this in the Tour of Southland are what it is all about. That's why the riders come.
No. Heavy fall, Doug, there. Back in the, you mentioned it earlier, that's just sort of a touch of a wheel. Also in the centre of the road, could have been on the road markings there. Bettles, one of the men down on the far right-hand side. I can see one of the Latitude Cycling team members there. And it could be Guy Yarrell, who was one of the first to fall down in the centre there from Oxford. Very hard fall here, and in these cold conditions, the fatigue factor, this is going to be hard for these guys to get themselves back up and motivated. But Bettles, straight back out, probably the man that come off the least hurt there in that crash.
These bike riders are so tough. That was a seriously heavy fall. You can see there further down, it looks like one of the advanced personnel riders who is having a real tough battle getting back on his bike. But it shows you just how tough these guys are. They get back up. The motivation straight away is get me on my bike. I want to get back into that breakaway. But that was a heavy crash.
And here come 3 of the 4 at least, and that are trying to make the junction across. They'll use the convoy here. That's all the various support vehicles that are in there to try and make their way towards the front. That is a huge effort by these guys here. They will be feeling the pain. The adrenaline will be rushing through the body.
It'll take a wee bit perhaps just to get back into the rhythm of this breakaway after that crash and these riders getting back in. It's at that point after you've chased back on after having a heavy fall like that, you reassess just what damage you have to your body. Have I broken my collarbone? Have I got a sore leg? Is my bike working properly? So there's a bit of a settle-in period again here for this breakaway, but they are so far up the road. I don't think it will obviously have an effect. Gosh, that looks sore.
The Cantabrian crashness here, number 104, is just starting to adjust things on the bike because it looks like the brake has taken a fair knock, as is the elbow there. He'll be feeling the pain a wee bit here as they try and settle into their paces. I'm just not convinced, Doug, that this front group are settling into things well.
And at 110 kilometres of this stage already travelled, we are now really starting to get into the harder parts. You can see one of the riders here starting to sneak away already. They do realise that the Sawmill Hill climb coming into Mataura, and then again the Waimumu hill climb on the way out are springboards for the finish into Gore. This will be really, really exciting for these riders, knowing they've got a buffer, but knowing that it potentially is all riding away down the road on them.
Yes, the road conditions changed quite a bit from this point on here, allowing for that springboard effort. And there's a rider who's taking full advantage of that, as we see Hashimoto of the Japanese team, who's decided to try and get across that gap as that one individual is disappearing up the road to try and pick up not only the KOM points, but also to try and stir things up in this group.
That is really interesting, seeing the Japanese rider there earlier on day 1 and 2 of this tour. None of those attacks would stick. Everyone would chase, but the fatigue, like you say, Julian, has set in, and it is getting easier and easier for these guys to make an attack that gets away. There's number 45. He's one of the Powernet riders sneaking away. He takes the hill preem. It looks like Joshua Kench from the Powernet squad. Aaron Sinclair's obviously had a bit of a plan to get his riders. He's the director, Sportif. That's the strategy. They're making a good fist of this so far.
Starting to fastly approach the 120k mark here of 151 kilometres, and it is now Keast from the TES team who's making a bit of a bid for glory here, and seeing what sort of reaction he'll get from that group as they descend down after those climbs towards Mataura. He is opening up a decent gap, but it's quite a descent here, a very fast part of the race, and it looks like the Japanese rider that is coming across, and it looks like again one of the Powernet riders. Let's not forget, in this leading group there are 3 Powernet riders, so they're also making a bit of a bid here for the overall for the team's classification, of course based on that general classification for the stage.
Hamish Keast really has driven this front group from the Transport Engineering squad. Hamish Keast has single-handedly taken 3 of these guys, Liam Walsh from the Powernet squad and Hashimoto from the Japanese Track Endurance squad. This break and that move from Hamish Keast coming down off Sawmill Hill was really strategic. Hamish, of course, knows this terrain, and this break is really, really going to have some good times ahead coming up to the Waimumu Hill, at least, with a bit of a buffer on the other breakaway riders.
So they enter the small township of Mataura, and then always plenty of support from the locals here before they head back out onto those hills, and they're fast approaching around 25 kilometres or so to go here for the end of the stage. And again, these 3 here now starting to set their paces right here. They're starting to work well as a tight unit, as the man from the Powernet team. Of course, he is the 2023 Oceania Road Champion, as we get a great shot here of the peloton chasing.
The peloton now are really starting to rev it up. 350, the gap between the peloton and the lead group. Remembering, of course, at Heathrope, that was over 6 minutes. So this peloton really have got into action and got into life. But, gosh, they've got some work to do over the next sort of rolling terrain to catch this front lot.
Here's the chasing group, the remnants of that lead group here now, who have got a bit of time to have to make up here, 1 minute 15 to be exact. They don't look as energetic, they don't look as focused as what we saw for those 3 out in front who are determined to try and hold out this field.
Yeah, this is the glory of stage racing. The SBS Bank Tour is a war of attrition, and it slowly but surely drains your batteries each day. And if you go using a lot of energy early on, which these guys did to get away, sometimes you pay the price further on in the stage. There's still a lot to fight for these guys. They may catch this trio. There's a couple of good more climbs coming up. That front trio, though, in relation to these guys, are really starting to put some time in.
This is an interesting shot here as we look at the peloton, and it looks like Kane Richards, former stage winner into Gore here, who's put himself on the front. Now, considering he's got a teammate up in the lead group here, I'm just a little bit confused as to the mix that is on the front. No surprise to see the yellow and the black there, of course, of the orange jersey.
On the climb up Waimumu, the front trio here, Hamish Keast is really gritting his teeth. You'll notice the body type of these guys, they're sprinters, they're bigger chaps, they're not the climbers that we've been looking at going up Bluff and up the Remarkables. So these boys have got some power, but they'll get over this climb, they'll count themselves down and say, how far have we got to go? And just looking at the nature and the faces on these guys, I think they're going to stay away.
Yeah, they're looking very determined, very focused indeed as they make their way over the top of that hill and fast approaching 20 kilometres here to go. And of course, this has been a point on this stage here that we have seen a lot of key breaks made over the year and held on to it right to the very finish.
143 k's in now and not far to go here for this lead trio, and we're coming up Broughton Street, which is always a tough springboard just before the finish of this race. The tough bit about Broughton Street is it's very straight, very long, and often, if the riders behind can see you, there's a wee bit of a target there for them to chase, but not in this case. I don't think these guys are going to stay away.
Yes, these riders have been receiving a lot of time checks throughout the day here, and they know they're getting very close to potentially taking out a stage as we see the familiar colours at the front now. 2 minutes 25 as they drop down Charlton Hill into the edge of the Gore Township for this finish.
Yeah, the descent of this climb is quite windy and twisty, so Josh Burnett and his crew will be up the front, staying out of trouble. That's his biggest goal at the moment, is to keep his powder dry and not to be involved in anything of any nature. But at the front here, these riders now are starting to really track sprint it. We saw this going into Tiania. Liam Walsh here is starting to attack. He's had a look under his shoulder. I believe he's putting some pressure on here.
This is serious stuff here, and it looks like the other two, the heads are starting to bow a wee bit. The Japanese rider looks back to Keast and sees if he can get some support, because the man out in front is opening up a decent gap up the Broughton Street climb.
Tough climb, Broughton Street. It's a false flat all the way to the top, and at this point in time you actually haven't even started climbing properly. Liam Walsh, the Powernet rider, he's looking over his shoulder. He's really hoping he's got enough left in the tank. Takes the preem off the top of the climb, the Advanced Agriculture Limited preem. He is really going to have to bury this though and put his head down, because those two boys behind him have got some serious firepower.
Of course, let's not forget there was a lot of expectation on them when they had 3 riders in the break there, so they had to try and play all their cards, and they've played the right one by the looks of it here with 3,000 metres to go. He continues to look over his shoulder here as he sucks in the deep breaths after a tough climb at the end of the day.
No recovery whatsoever. There's no chance for this man to take a breath. As you said, he's coming down now on the last right-hander before he starts heading into the main street. He'll probably have a wee bit of a sneak peek over his shoulder. It's extremely quick along here. It's a great descent, but he is really pushing hard all the way.
Great support from the folk in Gore, as per usual here, as the Australian Liam Walsh puts his hands in the air for the Powernet team to take the victory here on the penultimate day of the SBS Bank Tour of Southland.
And Hamish Keast from the Transport Engineering team is going to take second from the Japanese rider Hashimoto. Hamish will be disappointed, but what a fantastic effort from all those riders to take away so early in the stage and stay away for the whole day. Huge effort here from Liam Walsh. That is a stage into the Gore he'll remember for a long time.
A great reward here for the Powernet team, of course, having those 3 riders in the break of the day to take out the stage as we see the peloton coming in. I'm not thinking that there's going to be much of a difference over the general classification given the time differences here coming into Gore for the Mataura Licensing Trust Stage. On the penultimate day of the SBS Bank Tour of Southland, Josh Burnett continues to hold on to a lead of 1:41 over Wilson and Sam Jenner at 2:52, while a bit of a change around in the top 10 in the lower half. A straightforward day today for the man in the green jersey as he holds on to a significant lead going into the final day of the tour. While Josh Burnett continues to lead in the Jesco Hydraulics King of the Mountains with 37 points over 23 with Daniel Whitehouse. No change at the top of the leaderboard here for the Henderson Construction under 23 with the Australian Declan Trezise leading going into the last day. Local man Luke McPherson keeps himself in the middle of the peloton throughout the day to hold on to a 2:28 lead over Hayden and Ellington. The McLeod Jewelers most combative for the day was awarded to Hamish Keast after a mammoth effort out on the roads once again. Thanks to a smart move of putting 3 riders in the leading group of the day, it is Powernet now who leads the Wednesday Cycles team classification from Creation Signs Mitre Q.
Kian won earlier in the week, and he's been trying for 5 or 6 years since he first started racing here, so to get it done early and in my first time is very special, and it's also the first time I've ever won a race solo, so normally I'm better in a bunch kick or in a reduced group finish, but that was the first time I've actually got rid of everyone, and so to do it here in a race where it's the level's so high and is really cool.
Went pretty much perfect for us. The break went away, no one was too much of a threat to the overall GC, and boys did a fantastic job of riding the front and keeping it all in check. We didn't get too much help out there, which we kind of expected, so just a massive shout out to all of them for all their hard work, because I didn't do so much today. I just kind of sat in the wheels and followed along, so my teammates were great.
Follow the action from this historic race with live race updates, full results and pictures at tourofsouthland.com.